Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our course breakdown for this week's Wyndham Championship. Gonna break down what you need to know about Sedgefield Country Club to go out there, start your research for PGA DFS or for some outrights, and have yourself a week like we had at the 3M. So without further ado, a lot of info to get in here quickly. Let's get this thing rocking. So first and foremost, this is a short positional par 70, a Bermuda grass track. We could really stop the course breakdown right there, but of course, a lot more details we'll fill you in on. So yeah, that short par 70, it's just over 7,100 yards, a Donald Ross design. And in terms of difficulty, usually plays pretty easy. I mean, last year we had 15 under par win it with, 20 under par win it with Tom Kim. Year before that, 15 under par with a Kevin Kisner. So usually something at least 15 under winning it. Before that, it was a lot of like 20, 21, even like 22 under par winners. So perhaps expect to see that same sort of trend this year. It looks like it's going to be a little bit rainy towards the beginning half of the week, which should soften up the greens. There's expected to be low winds as of right now, and if that's going to be the case, then Sedgefield is going to be extremely attackable. A few reasons why. So if we go over to the stats, take a look at some of the ball striking metrics. Your driving accuracy here is right about tour average, which we'll get into why that's the case here in a second. But your green regulation percentage is way higher than what you're used to seeing. So if we look at 2022, the average was 73.1%, which is a whole 7% higher than what you're used to seeing. So with just 6,000 square foot greens, so that's the average around Sedgefield, that's actually a little bit surprising, right? We have like tour average size greens, but they're getting hit an absolute crap ton. The reason why, you have a lot of wedges in hand. So we're going to go hole by hole here in a minute. I'll show you exactly the kind of shots that players are facing, but it's a lot of wedges, a lot of mid irons at the very most. And especially when you get wet, soft conditions, you're going to see players take advantage. So the driving accuracy, maybe not as easy to come by. We do only have 29 yard wide fairways on average, which are about 6.5 yards more narrow than what you're used to seeing week to week. And that combined with the fact that you have such narrow corridors, you have all the tree-lined fairways around Sedgefield to worry about, making it especially difficult test to hit the short stuff. So though you have a lot of wedges, mid-irons in hand, oftentimes they're playing out of the rough, sometimes having to hit recovery shots out of the trees. So the main difficulty, the main real separator for the field is going to be that off the tee accuracy. It's why you've had guys like Tom Kim win, Kisner, Jim Herman, JT Poston, Snedeker, Stenson, Siwoo Kim, all players that are in one way or another kind of known for their off the tee play, right? Whether it's being super accurate or in some cases being okay off the tee and being really good wedge players. So there's a clear identity, a clear blueprint for how to get it done around Sedgefield. And because we've seen it so many times over the last 10, 20 years, we have a real good idea of what to expect too. So not real much that needs to change in terms of the modeling. Your agronomy is Bermuda grass from tip to toe. So your greens, fairways, collars, rough, all going to be Bermuda. And it is a 2.5-inch Bermuda grass. So it doesn't seem super long, but the missed fairway penalty was substantial last year. In fact, it was 0.1 shots higher per missed fairway compared to your tour average, 0.46 shots overall per missed fairway, which is pretty substantial, right? I know it's only 2.5-inch Bermuda, but when you miss into that, it makes it really hard to judge your distance. And when you have so many dog legs, it also makes it really difficult to shape your shot. So definitely expect players to try and put a priority on hitting the short stuff, as we'll see in our hole by hole breakdown here. All right, now for a little hole-by-hole breakdown. So just real quickly, going to go through some of the shots they're facing. Hole number one, a handshake, just a little 400-yard par 4. So hit the short stuff, hit a little wedge, and you'll have a birdie look. Something worth noting, we'll just go through it on the first hole, is first off, it's that woodland kind of parkland-style golf course where you have holes that are right next to each other, but in this case, a lot of trees in between holes. So you can miss in some spots. I mean, like over here to the right, like it's wide open, right? You'll have a direct line into the green. You miss to the left, there's OB if you go far enough left, or trees that you have to worry about. So it's off the tee. If you miss in the right spots, you're going to be just fine. If you can hit the fairway, even better to control a wedge. The fairways all have these little shaved off areas around the green, so you can see that lighter colored grass there. It's quite a steep slope as well, so all the greens, like most Donald Ross golf courses, are a little bit raised here, which means when you miss the greens, they are relatively difficult up and down. So that's why wedge play is important. It's why it's not all about putting around this golf course, because if it was, easy to get up and down, all it would be about is just making a bunch of birdies, right? Making those 15 to 20 footers, then maybe avoiding some of the trouble off the tee. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, right? Because of how difficult some of the surrounds are. So just wanted to point that out early. Hole 2, 437, dogleg from left to right. You do have to worry about this little creek going up the right side, but outside of that, not too bad. Hole 3, 172, so shorter par 3, definitely a birdie look if you hit a good wedge shot, good iron shot, maybe not a wedge for 172. Hole 4 is 424, pretty straightforward par 4. Hole 5 is 522. This is reachable in 2 if you hit a good tee shot. Pretty narrow though, so does require quite a bit of precision. Hole 6 is 420 yards. This is a forced layup, so rather than being a wedge, this one is slightly uphill and does require a mid-iron. Hole 7 is 224, so definitely a longer par 3, a little bit of water in front too. Hole 8 is 370. This is one of the easier birdie holes on property. If you can hit it in the short stuff, some of the more aggressive drivers might even choose to take it up a little bit further up here towards my cursor. A little flip wedge onto the green. Hole 9 is 415, little dogleg from left to right. Once again, if you can hit the short stuff, execute off the tee, you're going to have a wedge in a perfect look at the green. Hole 10 is 437, a little right to left dogleg action here, relatively large green too. Hole 11 is 483, so a few holes on the backside, I gotta say, have a little bit more teeth. So the front 9 scoring average, I'd expect to be probably a little bit better than the back. This is one of those holes. Hole 12, longer par 3, so another difficult hole. Hole 13, 398, dogleg from right to left. Most people are just going to lay up here with an iron off the tee, leave a little wedge in. Hole 14, 496, so another really long par 4. This one doglegs from right to left, probably the hardest hole on property. Hole 15 is 542. This one's reachable in 2 for most players, but does bring the water into play, right? There's not a bunch of water in play around the Wyndham Championship, but yeah, hole 15, it's a good thing it is, because if not, it'd be super, super easy. Hole 16 is 180 yards. It's a par 3. Water's not really in play there. Hole 17, 400 yards. A little left to right contouring, but once again, it's a very rudimentary, straightforward par 4. And lastly, hole 18 is 502 yards. This one is a harder, it used to be a par 5, at least for the members, it plays as a par 5. And yeah, it's a tougher hole too. I gotta say though, usually it plays a little bit easier than some of the other longer par 4s on the back. Main reason being is you've got all of these grandstands around 18 that you can just kind of miss at will and have it bounce off of the grandstands, and you'll get a free drop, right? So I don't know, I think it makes it a little bit easier than some of the other longer par 4s, where if you hit a shot that bad, right, you might end up 30, 40 yards over the green, right? And then really, being in trouble to get up and down. Hole 18 with the infrastructure they've got actually makes it a little bit easier, believe it or not. All right, now that we've seen the golf course, let's go through our key stats of the week and the sort of metrics I'm using to identify my top plays. So first off, we've got driving accuracy. I've also got good drive percentage on there too. With so many tight corridors, with driving accuracy specialists winning this golf tournament the last 5-6 years, no surprise that it's my #1 key stat. If you look at any sort of correlation modeling, regardless whether it's my in-house modeling, looking at some of the other data sites out there, every single type of analysis, and different sites, right, do this type of analysis a little differently. All agree that driving accuracy is extremely important. It's been undoubtedly correlated to winners and top 5 finishers, but even throughout the player pool and just looking at guys that make the cut, a lot of it are the guys that are just better in terms of driving accuracy throughout the year. So that's something to look at. Good drive percentage, of course, is the amount of time that a player is able to hit a green after their tee shot. So perhaps if you're missing fairways, right, only missing them by a yard or 2 and still giving yourself a good chance to hit the green, which around a course that has all these tight fairways, all the little overhanging trees, I think is a really good metric to look at. #2, we've got shots gained approach, a little bit of an emphasis on the wedges. If you can hit good tee shots, set yourself up for success. The other end of the spectrum is taking advantage of those opportunities, and most of it is going to be set up by wedge play, putting yourself to 5-10 feet. Obviously, the putter is going to be a huge part of that too, and we'll get to that here in a second. But if you're looking at the 50 to 125 yard range, 125 to 150, or that 150 to 175 yard range, all three of them utilized much more than your PGA Tour average here. So if you're going to look at anything, look at those three buckets. And lastly, we've got shots gained putting on fast Bermuda greens. Now, the main focus here should be the Bermuda grass. You'll hear time and time again about players that are just Bermuda grass specialists, and that is because of the grain that Bermuda brings to the table. It's unique in that factor. It aids a lot of players with their reads. I can tell you as somebody that's grown up on Bermuda, that's gotten very used to it, that if I play on Bermuda, I putt a whole lot better than if I putt on any other surface. And there are plenty of guys on tour that fit that same description. So I'm looking at Bermuda numbers this week, but also looking at greens that are running pretty quick, because they're going to start them off at 12.5 plus on the stint meter. Might even get closer to 13.5 by the weekend. So a lot of that will be weather based. It'll depend on the amount of rain that comes through the area. But in either way, expect them to be running pretty quickly. And that's probably something you want to incorporate along with the Bermuda grass strain. A few other things to look at. So comp courses, right? Of course, that'll be a whole section of the video that we go through here in a second, but try and look at some of the other short positional tracks on the PGA Tour. Maybe you just look at shots gained at courses under 7,200 yards. That might be a little bit too general, but you could throw that into your model. You want to look at around the green stats, but specifically, I would look at Bermuda grass around the green. Kind of like the greens around the green shots off of Bermuda also require different technique than any other surface. Bermuda is extremely sticky. You'll hear that with some of the shots out of the rough, but even more so around the green, it literally requires a different technique in most cases, right, to hit your around the green shots. So I want to look at players that in the past have shown that ability, and I don't want players, right, that are maybe struggling on that surface compared to the surface they're most familiar on. A few other key stats, looking at par 5 scoring. Some of the par 5s here tend to be relatively pivotal. And the last thing I want to look at is shots gained at this event specifically. Now, it's always been the last event on the schedule, or at least one of the last events of the year. And I want to look at players that can handle that kind of pressure, right? Think of a JT last week at the 3M Open. He looked fine there on Thursday, but then on Friday, when everything was on the line, when I'm sure he was thinking about his FedEx Cup ranking, it all tended to fall apart. So it's a little bit hard to encapsulate that, right? To find the guys that are comfortable being uncomfortable, but that's something that I'm going to look at. Maybe course history a little bit more here for this golf tournament than I would for other events. All right, and in terms of comps, we've got three really correlated courses here. So first off, Harbour Town Golf Links, that's the home of the RBC Heritage. Short positional track, lots of layups off the tee, and kind of like what you're going to get at Sedgefield, a lot of overhanging tree branches that cause trouble. So you've got to set up the right angles. You've got those small greens. It's the same agronomy, right? Bermuda grass from tip to toe. So I think that's by far the best comp you can look at, and that's why it's there at number one. Next up, we got Wyndham Country Club. So that's another Bermuda grass track. That one's in Hawaii, so different visually. I would say different in terms of like the weather right over there for the Sony Open, but still it's a short track where it's all about hitting fairways. Really hard to hit fairways on those real tight fairways at the Sony, but also you've got really difficult Bermuda grass around the green shots. So like kind of like Harbour Town, I think the only thing it lacks is that it visually looks a little bit different than what you're going to get this week, but very good comps from the playability standpoint. And then lastly, we've got TPC Southwind, which is where we'll be next week for the first leg of the playoffs. It's the FedEx St. Jude Invitational. It's a short track, Bermuda grass from tip to toe, much more water in play, not really as many trees. So once again, visually a little bit different, but the same kind of skill set. Around there, you've got to avoid the water off the tee. You've got to hit pretty good wedges. It's another short track. And then it's Bermuda grass from tip to toe, right? So you got that Bermuda grass rough. You've got the difficult around the green shots on that shaved off Bermuda, and a lot of the same kind of shots required from golf course to golf course. So if you're going to look at comps, these three, in my opinion, are by far the best you can look at. There are a few other tracks we've played that are more similar, but we don't see them as often, right? We see Southwind, Waialae, and Harbour Town every single year. And we have massive samples and a lot of crossover success with past champions from event to event. I mean, it's pretty crazy, the crossover success that you can find from golf tournament to golf tournament across the board here. So in terms of comps, normally, right, it's a little bit of a boost for our modeling. This week, it's a huge huge part of my modeling, but just because of how much crossover that we've seen at these 3 venues. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the course breakdown this week. Hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared to go out there, get your research started. Smash that like button on the way out of here, and let me know in the comments what you've got as the winning score this week. Again, usually it's at least 15 under par, if not closer to like 20. So I'm, with some of the early rain in the forecast, I'm going to take 23 under par. I think somebody's going to really get after it this year. I mean, Tom Kim, if he would have just parred the first hole, would have shot 24 under par there in 2022. So I'll take 23 under. But as per usual, guys, would love to hear your thoughts down below. We'll have core plays dropping later on this evening. Of course, on my Patreon page, I'll have my projections and research sheet dropping early this afternoon. And then throughout the week, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of my value plays, fades and sleepers, our weekly live stream Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. All of that content to make sure we're ready to go out there and have ourselves a week. So like I said, appreciate the support here, guys. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit of something about Sedgefield here during this video, and let's get this cash this week.